We're live. We're here. Yay.
Yay.
Excellent.
Hello.
Welcome. Hi. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Maz, for joining us. It's nice to have a guest back on our live stream again, and a very esteemed guest this time.
Allegedly.
Yeah, check back in at the end and we'll see if that's still the case. I want to introduce and share a bit more about yourself as well, but real quick, to back up a bit, we had an amazing in-person event. We had a live event recently, right here in New York City, at the amazing Fabric community space, nice. Sort of Soho, Tribeca area. I think it was a hit. What do you guys think? I think it was good.
So much. It was a smashing success.
Smashing success.
So fun. We had an awesome panel of 3 design leaders. We had Amanda George, Michael Farley, and Ron Golden.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a full house. Like, we sold out the tickets. So I think it was
a
50-person maxed out event.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so fun just seeing all these design leaders that we've all known for so long, both on the panel and then people in the audience, all come together and meet. And, you know, we're there to learn and to, learn from the panel, but just, there's like people that I've known for like 15, 20 years. Where I'm like, oh my God, you're amazing. And you're amazing. You guys just like go have a beer.
Yeah.
2 design leaders who I love. I was just like, you guys need to meet.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to take the train home, like train back to Brooklyn together.
I was there with that. Yeah. Those 2 grabbed the train together. And that was cool. Yeah. I think a lot of people got to do more in-person conversation that they'd never done before. Especially with just like-minded design leaders. It's definitely a feeling of like, oh yeah, I'm not the only one of them in the city.
Yeah,
that's how I feel when I talk to you guys.
Yeah, we're your mates. We're right here.
Yeah. It's like community.
Yeah.
Totally. So it was a really, really good hit. Big shout out to you two on the drinks and food. The catering was exceptional. I know you guys put a lot of time and energy into that. I saw a lot of people eating and drinking, feasting on your goods. So yeah, what a super fun time, and definitely probably proved our little idea of like, yes, New York wants to get together in person a bit more.
Yes.
So let's do another one.
And thank you, Jared, for doing all the audio visual, all the technical stuff, and really just being a stand for this event happening. Like, I think, sometimes it's so easy to talk about like, oh, we should do this. That'd be fun. The community wants it. Like Design Unfiltered, like you guys have been, we're like, hey, do you want to do a live event? And so people are typing in like, yes, yes, yes. But Jared, you make the rubber meet the road, man.
Let's do it.
It was really great. So thanks for being the spark to make it happen. It was really, really fun.
Thanks. Well, we will do another one. We have been talking a bit about what that is. I want to solidify a couple of things, and then I think we can try to do that. But the goal at this point, I think, is another one before the year is through. So we got to lock down a couple of things, but I would hope to make that happen this year. But we're here now. We're back on our live stream, and we have our amazing guest here with us, Christina Mazurowski.
Nice.
Did I get that right? Oh, butcher that?
Polish.
Okay. I always call you Maz. I'm so appreciative that you're here because we've chatted before. We did a live stream a long while back with some other great guests, but you have such a wealth of knowledge about the recruitment process. You've been in the recruitment space for quite a few years now as well, but you have specifically worked with a lot of designers. You've done some incredible hiring at places like Peloton, RGA. You are brand new to DataDog. You've just recently joined them, who also have, I think, a really well-known product design engineering team, very, very esteemed technology company. So you've been in this space. You've worked on what I think of as like the inside. You've been on the inside where you see the applications come through. You know how these hiring managers want to hire their teams. You know what they ask for. You know what they don't ask for. It's all this little inside curtain, which I think sometimes for the designers out there, they're on the other side going, I really want to work there. And then what? They don't know how that happens or how that transpires or how to go about that. And I think you've seen the full inside view of that. So as always, encouraging lots and lots of questions. from people. But yeah, maybe you could give us a quick intro on some of your background and a bit about what you do.
You know, the journey to being a recruiter is never a...
Was it a dream as a kid? What are you talking about?
I feel like I have met like one or two people that wanted to be a recruiter, and that was because their parents were recruiters or something.
Interesting. Okay.
I never knew this was a job. I went to school for painting and drawing. I wanted to, when I left college, I wanted to be teaching figure drawing as a collegiate professor for the rest of my life. And quickly learned in the real world that, you know, especially in this country, you need health insurance, you need benefits. And I moved to New York after school. I went to school at New Paltz, just upstate, and it had a really great design and arts culture, I would say, because a lot of the teachers were actually New Yorkers that were active working artists that taught at the university, because it was only an hour and a half upstate. So that was like a really good intro, because you kind of like saw people that were making it work, so to speak. And then when I moved down to the city, I was just working receptionist jobs. I landed at Artisan, which I think, Erica, you and that was just such a great experience to learn recruitment, because it's like a really small shop, like kind of boutique agency. And at the time, I'm aging myself, this was like 15 years ago, but it was, you know, people were still bringing portfolios in, like as a physical portfolio that you would flip through.
Remember those days.
And from art school, you know, it was just kind of a very natural thing that I was interested in, that I gravitated towards. And as a receptionist, one of the recruiters, Kate Rogers, who I have brought with me other places, shout out, she was like, you could do this. I want to go to bakery school or pastry school, or whatever the proper terminology is. I want to train you to be my successor, basically. And that was when the recession happened and print, quote unquote, died, and like digital design became a thing, and this term UX became a thing. And I worked third party for a while. I ended up working at a fashion third party agency that was building an in-house creative specific team, because that was when all the fashion houses in New York wanted digital designers in house. And so did that for a couple of years. And that's when RGA kind of became a client because of the Nike account.
Wow.
They brought me on, and they were really doing, that was when RGA was doing like the Fuel Band, and they were creating they were creating a lot of these digital experiences or activations, as the Nike client likes to call them, building like, you know, how to do your own shoe on the Nike website. And so it was a little more than just like a flash banner or, you know, and that was kind of where my product brain started growing. And then fast forward, they sent me to the London office. I started building the EMEA teams.
Wow.
And that was just an amazing experience, because that was also pre-Brexit, when you could basically hire from anywhere in Europe.
Awesome.
And so it was just really great to kind of see all those different design cultures in one place. And that was when we built Beats Music. Which was a music platform. And that was my real first digital product experience. And I just fell in love with it. Like, just how you think about the user, and how like the best design is, you know, you don't feel it. It's kind of like recruitment. Like the best kind of recruitment. You don't really feel, it doesn't feel painful necessarily for both the candidate and the hiring manager. And then pandemic happened, you know, like worked on a lot of fintech apps in Europe, because also the banking apps there are a little more, I don't want to say advanced. They've just got like a lot more.
It's a bit further ahead. It's
diversified a little more. And so then pandemic happened. I think I'm one of the only people that moved back to New York during the pandemic.
I was here.
yeah, I was contracting at Magic Leap for a little bit with my former CCO, James Temple, who's had a huge influence just on my career and design sense and all of that. And that was the first time I worked with hardware, software, and I kind of just fell in love with that collaboration. And Peloton, the role opened up. I applied. I did not think I would get it. It was when they were like super popular in the pandemic. And then, yeah, they never had a product design recruiter before. It was a bunch of tech recruiters that didn't really know the discipline. And so like that really felt like a baby of mine because it merged like sports and mission and just beautiful design that feels seamless at its height. But yeah, and then here we are. It started at DataDog. Yeah, baby. I started 3 weeks ago. So first recruitment screen is this week. So
all right, you're straight into it.
Yeah, right in. Oh yeah.
I love that. I love that. The time that you were at Peloton really was a pretty wild time for them, I think, in terms of growth. Not all companies experience growth like that. And then for you as this recruiter, like was the demand for them at the time to hire a lot? Like they were like, we're growing a lot. We need a lot of people. Or I don't know. That was a crazy time for them. It seems like, and you were right in the thick of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think my time at RGA EMEA helped.
Right. Yeah.
That region was growing probably exponentially around like just as fast when I was there.
Yeah.
So I'm very used to like hyper growth environments.
That's cool.
I feel like that's kind of where I thrive a little bit. But maybe it's the competitor in me. I don't know. But Peloton, when I joined, it was high volume. You would have like 8 to 11 recs on your desk at any given point.
Wow.
And it was a lot of design, user research, that kind of thing. And then as our growth in the pandemic was, as I'm sure you're well aware, most of the press releases, it was up and down.
Yeah.
And that was really the interesting part for me was when we had to start pivoting because when I joined, it was still like startup mentality, even though they were a public company and we were competing against talent at Google.
Yeah.
Meta.
Big
and I think it wasn't necessarily the volume that was difficult. It was making sure that we were staying focused on what we needed for a future product. And in a hyper competitive environment when it was such a volatile industry.
Yeah.
So those were crazy times. I'm just thinking like 21, 22.
Yeah.
I mean, we would have candidates we were repping and they'd have 5 or 6 other offers by the time they got through the entire process, which was great because we had so many jobs we were juggling. We're like, okay, we find one senior product designer, we can send them to 6 places. So it's like you up your chances of making a placement, which is great. But then if each one of them have 4, 5, 6 other offers and you're competing against the Mangs, which if it's all about comp, it's really tough to compete with that. I think Peloton paid well too, but but that's like kind of the stratosphere. It was a wild time.
And we paid competitively on base for sure. When it came to equity, to your point, and you're stacking up against 4 or 5 other offers, that we just could not compete. Like we had not been around as long as the other, tech companies and just could not compete from an equity point of view. And so you would have to get really creative. And it really was also more about finding designers that were interested in the product.
Yeah.
And I feel like historically I had always just been looking for top talent and selling the talent. And I think that period of time helped me understand more of a nuance of like finding someone that's right for the brand and the company. And like you might have this really well-paid top talent that's performing great in interviews, but is that who we're going to offer? Are they going to stay long term? I think a lot of companies are thinking about tenure and longevity of hire. If they're doing it, in my opinion, in the right way, I think.
Yeah. What would you say to candidates? Because that brought up a point. Like, I feel like in the buyer's market, when it's, like how it is now, it's starting to change, but it's definitely like candidates are having to really sell themselves harder than they ever have before for a long time. And oftentimes we hear from clients like, oh, we just don't know if they really want us. They're not really, they're not as passionate about our brand as we want them to be. And sometimes from the candidate side, they're saying like, well, I don't know enough about you. Like might have some brand recognition, maybe not. But I need to be wooed too, even though it might be a buyer's market, like a company's market. Yeah. What would you say to candidates who feel like they're caught in that rock and hard place where it's like, well, I want to show that I'm interested, but I also don't want to be disingenuous and say, oh my God, I can't wait to work for your company. Wait, which one are you?
Yes, no, you brought up a great point about being like disingenuous versus like an organic. I personally was looking for work all summer, so I have been through this myself this summer from the other side of things. And I know it's a lot easier to say than to do because, again, I went through this and it's difficult when you're feeling the pressure of getting a job and you want to perform well in interviews. I think it really, and I hate to make this comparison, but it's so much like dating when you're interviewing. Like really, truly. And, like I had cringed a lot when I used to ask the question, like, so why Peloton in the beginning? But I always kept it short and I just wanted to hear the answer because I feel like I'm not looking for someone that like is gonna, pledge allegiance for the rest of their lives. Like I just want someone who has that genuine curiosity for the brand that has a little bit of knowledge and understands why their own brand matches with that brand. And I also feel like I interviewed at places where, you were told you need to study the culture page. If you don't talk about this, you will not make it past the first interview. And it's like, you can do that and I could be prepared, but like, I'm not good at not being a genuine person. And so
authentic.
Like it kind of, it felt like even just feeling pushed to talk about it in the first interview actually turned me off to that company. So I think it's really hard to do, but you have to kind of put yourself in a mindset as a candidate. Like, do I want to work here? Like, how much time am I going to put? I'm interviewing a lot, right? Because like,
we're trying to.
You're trying to interview a lot. Like, and when you get to that point where you feel like it's just not right, that's when I start switching and I'm like, okay, this is practice. I'm just going to continue practicing and see. And like, maybe they'll change my mind, but I'm trying to get to know them a little more. I don't like the signal that the love of the brand is so important, but.
Right. And so during those practice interviews where they're probably just like, oh my God, I love her. Like, you got to hire her. It's like that totally happens all the time. It's like, unless you want something with negotiations too, right? Whoever can walk away first does energetically have the power position. If you think about it like that. I mean, I had a design leader that I've known for years and years who's amazing and who was just, this was like the height of the nadir of our hiring recently. And he was like, I was just, not making it through. Sometimes the role would just dissolve. Sometimes they just, pick somebody else. I mean, it's just, this was just a constant thing that was happening. And then finally he's just like, fuck it. He was just like, I'm just going to take this interview. I don't even know if I want it. I'm going to interview them as much as they're interviewing me. Like, I don't know if I want it. And I was actually really honest about that. And that was the role that he landed.
I love that.
They felt that there was like more of a power balance and like, oh, he's bringing something to the table. Like he's got his own thing going on. So I thought that was interesting.
And like, I have a really hard time with take-home tests. I've been teaching about this like almost my whole career.
I know. Jared, I know.
Wait, didn't Peloton have one?
We got rid of it when I was there.
Good.
But I will
time
say,
machine one.
When I started interviewing this summer, I was like, I'm not going to do a take-home test. Like, it's against my ethos.
As a recruiter? Yeah.
Then I suddenly realized I need to be taking like some of the take-home tests I was getting in the interview process, like were like I basically decided which ones were positive exercises for me for future interviews and which were which started feeling like unpaid labor.
Yeah.
And I would turn down the ones where it was like, here's a job on our website, find 3 people kind of. And then I would do some of the ones that were maybe a little bit longer, but more thought out. Like, how would you approach the strategy? Talk us through, you know, your metrics, like you're having trouble on a difficult search, how would you pivot? And like that was also like good exercises for me so that when I got the interview I wanted at DataDog, I was more prepared because of all the practice.
The priming, the articulation.
It's just really hard for me to swallow, like in this market, like having people do unpaid take-home tests. But,
especially if it's on the company's brand. Like I feel like that's when it starts to feel like free work. If it can be in like a different industry, something like that, sometimes those could be more palatable, but still it's a tough ask for candidates just in general, because they might be working a full-time job.
Well, yeah.
And then of course the take-home test says, oh, this should take you 4 hours, but then the ones that really succeed are probably going to put way more time into it.
Exactly.
Right.
And like
bias.
That's also happening like behind the scenes. Recruiters I see all the time, like fighting actively against that stuff.
That's good to know.
Yeah. It's just very difficult sometimes because it's kind of like I don't know, like if you were selling a house, like real estate wise, it's kind of like the people that are selling the house are like, no, we don't want to rearrange the furniture and make it better experience for people. That you know, like, so the realtor or the recruiter can say like, this is my opinion, but like, it's really the hiring manager's interview process. So
at the end of the day,
I think that's also just, I try to approach candidates when I'm giving them a take-home test with like a I know kind of thing.
That can make a difference.
But it also gets hard as a recruiter because you get tired and run down. And, you know, sometimes with searches, it feels like you're banging your head against a wall and just can't find the right answer. You don't think the right answer's out there. So
when you face that challenge in the past, and I think it maybe some of your experience at Peloton, for example, when they didn't have a design recruiter before, but they needed to hire a lot of designers, and we kind of know that applying a standard recruitment process to then hiring a designer doesn't always work. It needs to be a bit unique to hiring a designer. Like, were you able, or did it take time? Were you chipping away at like, all right, how do I get this team in this company to help come up with this special process to get the designers that we want? We want to be competitive. We've got this high bar, but applying our process for engineers, it's not going to work here. And you had to kind of maybe help bring that expertise to them because they hadn't had it before, maybe? Was it?
Interestingly enough, when I joined, they had a really robust design interview process. Because, and this is part of the reason I loved working there. Because the hiring managers were very engaged in hiring. So
that helps.
So they were like, we don't have a design recruiter. We're going to build a process that kind of helps the tech recruiter
just plug into it.
So it wasn't necessarily that I had to build a design process. It was more, how do I make this process more catered to a product designer as opposed to like the process being catered to the design team that was hiring. I think just because, I mean, and the design team there, you know, like Bud, who built it, like spent such a long time building a tight knit, small, like well-crafted team that they wanted to be really considerate about who they were bringing on. And then when we hit hyper growth, I was like, it kind of took me 6 months to a year to kind of build that trust where they knew that I wasn't just going to put people in front of them for no reason. And then we started chipping away and making the interview process a little more streamlined. So I think that's also something, if you're a candidate and you're talking to the recruiter and they don't really understand design, getting to that next stage is going to be the most important.
Right.
And how do you do that? If you're talking with like around zero, like you're speaking to somebody who's just like checking things off of the box, what's your advice for designers to get to that next step where they're actually talking to somebody in design? How should they approach that initial interview to be the strongest they can be?
Yeah, I would definitely ask the recruiter what they're looking for in a designer. Like some of the best questions that I get asked are in that first recruitment screen when it's time, for the candidate to ask questions are, I read the job description. Either it's, sometimes it's not very specific. So you could say like, it's not very specific. Like, do you know what work stream this is on?
Yeah.
And then try to like connect your skill set to that. Or if it is very specific, you could say, I see that it's on this consumer facing digital app. Like, what are you looking, is previous app experience required? Like, what are you looking for in this designer? Are they going to be only on app, or will they work across some of the other streams? I feel like just talking through understanding that will almost help the recruiter be like, okay, I need to put this person in front of someone that can answer these questions.
Just stop asking me questions.
Sounds like you know what you're doing. I'm gonna hand you off.
When I'm doing something new, or like sometimes I had to do engineering roles, or I had to do something I've never recruited for before. I just am very honest with the candidate and like transparently. I'm not fluent. I know how to ask how to get to the bathroom. Person at the next stage probably is going to be a little.
Yeah. And plus the beauty of asking what they're looking for in the role, you can tailor your answers based on that. Like once you understand what's important to them, maybe what have they not been seeing in other candidates, like you can then, tailor your conversation.
Self-align.
And if they don't give you the time to ask questions, you can also, I always found, and I learned this from recruiting user researchers, because I find that they tend to respond to a question with a clarifying question first and then answer. And I feel like that is really important. It kind of gives you a little more control over the interview.
Totally.
It'll be like, you could ask like, so what does collaboration look like? Like, how do your design teams and product design teams and management teams work together? And you could say like, well, why are you asking that question? Or like, what's it like there? Or, something like that.
Get some better context.
Not, something more specific than.
That's so helpful. I was working with someone recently who had been interviewing for, just a bunch of roles. And the feedback that he kept getting was that he was speaking too much about product thinking in his interviews. So then his next interview, which was like a perfect role for him, he spoke about design thinking, of course. And then the feedback from that hiring manager was, I wish you spoke more about your product thinking. And he had asked the recruiter at this company, large company, do you have any feedback or do you know what they're looking for? And that person did not know how to answer that question. So like the internal recruiter, did not set them up for success. So I was like, you need to ask these questions. Like when you go in, if you only have 45, 30 minutes, you need to say like, hey, which direction would you prefer me to start in or to go towards? Like, exactly like what you're saying, because you can control it really on your side too, versus just being at like the mercy of what they're going to grill you on kind of.
Yeah. And like, I always feel like some green flags that I get when I'm interviewing are, that I also try to put in practice as a recruiter are like, send a nice prep email so you know what topics are going to be discussed. And then like when I got those questions, or when I got that prep as a recruiter, when I was interviewing, I would ask like some more follow-up questions. I think one of them was like, tell me about a time where you failed, or you got feedback and how you responded. And I was like, are you talking about feedback with my performance or feedback on candidates? Kind of. And then they were like, you could answer either way, you know?
Yeah.
But stuff like that. And I just feel like if you get some of those preps from the recruiters and it's a positive recruitment process, it tends to then mean that the hiring managers are trained properly. You know, when you have a smooth recruitment process at the onset and you're not like kind of what I said earlier, like if you're not feeling the friction of it as much, that usually means that there's a proper people team set up. They're training the interviewers. The hiring managers are really involved. Whereas if it's feeling shaky and you don't get feedback for like a couple weeks, that's usually because the recruiter is not getting feedback from the hiring manager. And if the hiring managers are engaged in recruitment, like what's going on there, you know? So
90% of the time.
Yeah, I'm certain that you guys do it too, Joanne and Erica. But when we get to work with companies, right? Sometimes I'm working with like a coordinator at a company who's not specialized in the area or the role, and their prep emails are just date and time and interviewer at best. Sometimes that's if we're lucky. And so that's fine. That's, to me, I'm like, that's not, you don't necessarily know. It's not always your role. But I find for us as the external recruiters, I love to get in there and prep that designer on like, this is who you're going to meet. These are some things that they've been talking about. You've only got 45 minutes. Here's how we're going to make the most of that time. Try to think about this. This is really important to this person always. So be prepared to, you know, show, don't tell if you can. Have some files queued up, ready if need be. Have them within accessible reach if it comes. Like, I'm doing that sort of stuff. And you get to do it as well, Maz, because you sort of know and understand what it is to hire a designer. But as a candidate, it can help you so much. And maybe if you don't get much of that, maybe try to ask or.
Yeah. And if you're not getting a lot back from the asking, that's.
You're just coming in so blind.
Yeah.
You got 1 hour and your design leaders, Joanne, your person that got this role recently, like 20 years experience, probably more. And we're going to get in a room for an hour and you want to talk about what? Like, we got 20 years of stuff to talk about. Like, where should we begin? What should we get primed on? Like,
but I think those companies weed themselves out of people's process, right? Like, if they're not getting anything, they're probably not going to want to work there.
Yeah. And like the prep is also, it can feel like a lot as a candidate. I know I was like overwhelmed and often frustrated because I was like, I have 15 years of experience. Like, like,
is that enough?
I have to explain myself. But,
yeah.
I do think that you really learn a lot about the company, how they shepherd you like through the process. And it shouldn't feel like, I remember very specifically at DataDog, I was really nervous for my panel because of some of the experiences I had had in the past couple of weeks at panels places. And then I got on the call and it was just like within the first couple minutes, like I was like back in my recruiter body.
Cool.
I was like, okay, I'm just talking about this. I'm not worrying. You know, the KPIs are coming out of my mouth normally. Like, and I feel like that's when you know that you found like a team you want to work with that respects your work and admires it. And like, you don't necessarily want to work somewhere where you have to like, you know, give your firstborn to prove.
Word. Well, hey guys, we're at the halfway mark, a little over halfway. Maybe this is a good time to take questions from the audience. So the beauty of Design Unfiltered is that this is live. We're taking your questions live in the moment. So you've got this wonderful recruiter, Maz, here to answer your questions. She's super experienced. She's come from great companies. So this is a really golden opportunity to ask her anything, or, you know, ask all of us anything you might have in your mind about anything to do with design recruitment. So please put your questions in the chat. Maybe we'll try to limit our answers to maybe like 5 minutes max per question so we can get through as many as we can, if that sounds good to y'all.
I think we've got some good ones here.
Yeah, there's a couple in there already. Yeah. Go for it.
You want to take, so Swapna has put a couple questions up. So hi, Swapna. She's asking, what challenges do you see recruiters facing when hiring product designers in today's market? And how can candidates like me, who have 6 to 7 years of UX experience, stand out to meet those challenges?
I would say some of the challenges I had found, especially when you're looking through sheer volume, like if we're talking about the market we're in now, Joanne, to your point, where it's kind of like a quote unquote company's market at the moment. Anything you can do to your portfolio that makes your visual language and your design thinking stand out. You end up, and I'm sure you all see this too, you see the very similar templated portfolios over and over again. And as a recruiter, you start like wondering, like, do you really understand design thinking, or are you just putting what you think you're supposed to put into a UX portfolio? For me, that's when I get excited, is when I see a designer's like, you know,
flavor.
Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Their flair, like in a portfolio. And I think that's a good way for it to stand out.
That's a great starting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just kind of pops a little bit more. Yeah, I think, and these are things that every designer has control over, I think. To an extent, you don't always have control over the companies you've worked for. Sometimes what their brand looks like, you know, you got to play within their systems. But for your portfolio and your site and your work, like that's you and your personality, your expression, your flair. You get to pick all of that. So that's an interesting point about the templates too.
And to that point,
deviating a little.
Yeah.
And to that point, it's kind of like, you know, like they say, dress for the job you want, like make the portfolio for the job you want, because
great point.
A lot of times when you're looking at so many designers, you know, companies want someone that has worked on a work stream that's similar, you know, like, have you done Shopify e-commerce sites before? Like, I'm not saying like people want to do that necessarily. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But like, if I'm looking at portfolio and it doesn't really have any of that in there, and I see another portfolio that has more e-com, then I'm gonna gravitate towards that. So even if like you've worked for big brands on work streams you're not really proud of, like make sure you have what you want to work on in your book and that you're applying to roles like as such.
And would you include like even things that might be on spec? Like maybe if they like designing for the role that you want, maybe they don't have that Shopify e-commerce experience, but that's what they want.
Yeah.
Would you recommend them like doing a personal project, labeling it as such?
That's, the words out of my mouth.
Yeah. Okay. Right. That's very key. Very key. But just showing like, hey, I'm interested in this. I'm putting the time into making this. Obviously, it didn't launch. I don't have any metrics to share about it, but like I'm just showing you visually, like this is what I want.
Yeah,
about something like that.
Annotations that have your design thinking are also good. Like static photos of design process can sometimes be hard to evaluate as a recruiter.
Yeah,
and like I've seen a lot recently of people just putting their portfolios into Figma files, and I've seen hiring managers gravitating more towards that.
Yeah. But would you say that doing stuff on spec would be useful? Like, would that be something that would be
a positive? Depends on level, but I think like for that question, like 5-6 years, I'd say because you have enough work that you can show. I've worked in an environment here, but like this is really what I want to be doing, and this is how I would approach it.
Yeah.
He's been flexing a bit. Yeah, I would buy into that too. If there was a designer that had only worked on web-based B2B stuff, but wanted to show me some mobile consumer things, even if it was a bit more spec or playful, something that they were doing, at least you're giving a signal. If you didn't have any of that, I've got no signal at all to go on. I'm only seeing web B2B. I got no mobile at all. And this role is very mobile heavy. So it's like, I got nothing to go off. So something is maybe better than nothing.
Yeah, I like to see it. Yeah, I like to see it too, just for the fact that I'm like, okay, they're in it to win it. Like they're actually going the extra mile. They really care about it. They're putting the work into doing something that they're, you know, like Babe Ruth, like they're calling their shot. Like I want to go here. Yeah. So they're putting their money where their mouth is. Like they're putting that in their book and taking the time to put that in there, which again, to your point, Jared, yes. Like if I don't see anything in there that gives me that signal, then there's just nothing there. But to me, it's like, oh, they're passionate and motivated, and you can't teach that, right?
Yeah.
Like you can teach someone on the job how to make mobile apps, but like to actually teach somebody to have that interest, or even to have that like kind of just general design sensibility, that's somewhat teachable, but I think a lot of that is instinctual. That's kind of a different conversation, perhaps.
Yeah.
I pulled my toe into interesting shark-infested waters there.
Yeah.
But
Careful.
yeah, but I think the energy it takes to make something like that is a good signal.
Yeah. I mean, even like one time, like success story wise.
Cool. I love these.
When I was living in London, and we were recruiting for our Istanbul team, our hiring manager in London was looking for folks that like knew Turkish banking, wanted that design flair. The Turkish market at the time wasn't really using Sketch. I think it was at that point.
Yeah, probably.
Really using Sketch, and we worked in Sketch all the time. And I found a portfolio of Chara, who now, like, just to see the way his career has blossomed, like, we hired him because he was a Sketch ambassador at the time in Turkey. So like he wasn't using it in his day-to-day, but he was like active in the community and had a passion for it. And like that was what brought him to London with our team.
Got him the job.
Cool. I love
that's awesome. That's a prime example of just showing that you're into it.
Yeah,
it's very cool. I saw a couple more questions there. Did you want to grab something, Joanne? Any that caught your eye?
I can't grab anything. My thing isn't working. So.
Okay, here's one from Matt. Hi, Matt. Matt writes, of course, this varies from role to role, but what do you find are the main reasons for filtering out otherwise qualified candidates? That's assuming they are qualified candidates, of course. Does that generally happen in reviewing resumes, portfolios, or something else? This is a question we bring up all the time in Design Unfiltered. The next question is, do you look for someone that checks all the boxes or checks the most important boxes?
Good question.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, just my immediate reaction to this is checks the most important boxes. Quite often they don't check all of the boxes. It's
pretty hard. It's pretty hard.
But I would say also, especially recently, and I mean, let me know if this is what y'all are seeing too. Everyone wants that UX thinker with a UI skill set in one person. And a lot of times the job descriptions can be, nondescript in that regard, like which way they're leaning. And for me, when I'm reviewing portfolios, that historically has been kind of like the main thing I'm looking for. Like, is this position that we have, do they need to work end to end? Do they lean a little bit more UX thinking? Do they lean a little bit more UI? And then I'm looking for that in portfolios. And to answer your questions about resumes or portfolios, I look at portfolios first if I'm looking at design. And then I do look at the resumes, but I often look more at how the resumes are formatted, designed themselves, kerning, typography, because you're a designer,
I love that. I love that.
I agree with that, from also being an undergrad BFA person, but I think the resumes and the ATS stuff right now, and the reason people are really pulling back on like the designy stuff, like not using InDesign, like just kind of a regular plain one for the ATS.
So interesting you say that, because I get this question like quite a lot from people where they're like, are you actually just using an AI bot to review my resume?
Yeah.
The places I have recruited, that was not a thing from a design point of view. Like maybe if you're looking for an engineer that has very specific like Terraform and Kubernetes, like then you're going to use the filter to search if those are on a resume. But like I have not ever used, a filter to look through resumes at design portfolios. But that's also like, I'm also aware that that's not every recruiter at every location.
Sure.
Kind of thing. I just think it would be really hard to lean on that kind of way of searching.
Yeah.
A design perspective, but
I agree. I think we had somebody else on here who was saying that some of the filters would probably be location based, whether they're like, in the US, if that's a requirement, years of experience, like title sort of progression, I think. Forget who said, I think maybe it was Ariel, but and that's kind of what sort of divides like the bulk into still 300 to go through, but I think that's where the other ones.
Exactly. That's where, and that's what I mean. Like if it's a specialized skill set, like, I'm going to look for keywords to, like you said, narrow it down from 600 to 300. But even then, like, I don't know, maybe I just try to go through every single one because I would want the same done for me. But I also know that like maybe a good workaround would be like if you can upload 2 resumes, because I know from applying this summer, sometimes you can upload 2, like, so maybe upload a Word doc one and then, or have like your formatted one that you want on your website or something.
I had a candidate send me 2 different resumes. That was kind of the first time that happened, actually. I was surprised that was the first time, because this is a constant question we get here on Design Unfiltered. It's like the fear of the resume bots. Like, so
I don't know, maybe it's just not hitting our world because design is unique in that way. Like, but even like I work on other roles, and I've never recruited that way. I think it's kind of a recruiter's ethos and who you're working with.
And also, to your point too, if you are parsing through 200 or 300 resumes, which I do too, I think we probably all do, having that visual language of a really beautifully designed resume will hit you. You know it when you see it, and you're like, okay, this one's a keeper. Let me dig a little deeper. Let me find it to see if there's something in here that I can work with. Like I've had, like, just case in point, I've had this design leader's resume open on my desktop for like 2 weeks. I don't have anything for her, but her resume is so beautifully designed that I'm like, I don't want to close this because I don't want to forget about her.
I also,
it's like she's kind of like she's in my wheelhouse right now, but just because the resume was so beautiful.
I also do this thing sometimes where I put a design portfolio up that I really like, a benchmark. And then, because when you're going through so many portfolios, sometimes it's hard to remember what you're even looking for. And so I'll put that benchmark portfolio up, and then I'll like click back and forth, and I'll be like, okay.
You need a palette cleanser.
Sorbet. Or just because sometimes you do see a portfolio that really resonates with you, but maybe it's not right for that job. I also think that a LinkedIn profile, for me personally, like I look at that before the resume.
Same.
Like I don't know. I think
I watched a CEO and a design leader the other day. 2 totally different experiences of how they assessed designers. The CEO went straight to LinkedIn profiles and was looking at like what he had a set of parameters in his mind that they're searching against too. So what that company was known for, did that company have a high bar for craft? Because that was important to them. So looking at that, looking at tenures at the companies, looking at if they'd been promoted and progressed at the company. It's a very senior leadership role, hence the CEO working on it. So he's doing that. And then I go and sit down with the design leader the other day at their office in New York. And we're like, all right, let's jam on some portfolios that you like. And like, show me your lens. How do you look at stuff? And he's like, all right, this is how I do it. He just went straight to like, he's like, I go straight to the portfolio. I don't look at the CV. I don't look at the LinkedIn profile. I'll come back to it, but I want to go straight to the work. And that's my first bar. If the work's not good or I'm not seeing, and this role happened to have more of a visual lean, if it's not presenting itself, then I don't know if the CV is going to help much because the work itself is not showing me. So it's hard to cater to everyone, but I think it's, I had this question from someone I spoke with this morning, and he said, like, what do you think I should really optimize for, the resume or the work? And I said, no matter what, the work's always going to speak for itself. And going back to that CEO, looking at profiles, after that, I know that I can sway his opinion through the work.
Right.
Profile's not grabbing and they're unsure. Let me back it up. Let me show you the work. Oh, the work speaks for itself.
And you bring up a good point, Jared, that it's not always just the hiring manager. Like, this goes through like 4 or 5 lenses.
Sometimes. Multiple lenses.
Not to take control, but I do see a question that I think is very
Let's do it. I love it. Yeah.
Great. Good.
From Sebastian, if you're going through so many portfolios and resumes each day, do you find yourself having time to actually read cover letters? Depends on the role. If it's a user researcher role, I read cover letters. I feel like that's kind of part of their craft, similar to product managers sometimes. Product managers tend to be more of like a case study, KPI exercise kind of thing. But I also think it's very, very important to just write a quote unquote cover letter for yourself, not necessarily each job. Make sure that's on your LinkedIn profile at the top. And this kind of goes back to what we were saying about like what you're looking for, like dress for the part you want. Like just write your own letter of intent without looking at a job description. Put it on the top of your resume, put it on the top of your LinkedIn. And then you can just kind of, if you want to still do a cover letter, you can,
riff on that a bit.
Honestly, like to your point, Jared, it's the work, like from a design point of view, like user research and product management. I do look at cover letters, but it's much more about like, I call it a letter of intent, not a
Well, they don't have really portfolios as like that
much.
Right.
They don't have the work to speak.
Yeah,
like that, like the design work itself.
But even just like a 2 to 3 sentence thing on your website, if you're a designer, that says like, this is what I've done. This is what I excel at. This is what I want to do.
Something that I see people do a lot. Something that I see people do a lot in cover letters is that they're so full of cliche and so just and it's like, I'm a team player, I'm collaborative, I'm attentive to detail. It's like all these things that everybody is, right, in an ideal world. I was listening to a podcast last night called Hidden Brain. It's an NPR podcast. And they were talking about like how to win people over. And so it was, if you're just lauding your achievements and just bragging, it tends to not resound very well with people. But if you can brag, but then bring humor into it, so you're kind of sort of not debasing yourself, but you're just not taking yourself as seriously and you're infusing your personality into it. I think that's a great opportunity, right? To to have an opportunity to stand out. Like, what makes me different? What personalizes this?
I feel like storytelling is what I respond to. Storytelling is what I respond to. Maybe that's the RGA in me. I don't know. They were big storytelling. It's in my DNA.
It's a cave person in you. It's like we're all cave people sitting around a fire telling stories. That's what I think.
And we're bringing back the pictures now too, not just words. We're doing pictures as well.
And I do think that the cover letters these days, even like just talking to my peers, like us applying all summer, like so many people are doing the AI thing.
Right.
And I just like, I don't know, I've always been adverse to cover letters. It's the art student in me. Like, let me see a picture.
I don't know what they tell you.
One thing I like to say to some of my coaching clients for their resumes, if they all start to look the same, like how do you set yourself apart? Think about mentally cutting up your resume. Like, let's say I have your resume and I cut it into just like strips of all of the different things that you have and I threw it into the air. If I pick up a piece, can I match it back to you? Or can it go to like 5 people? Right. So all of those more generic, like summary objectives,
trustworthy, collaborative.
But like, like the Google XYZ formula, kind of like, I did this is how, and this is the result. Like, tell us the cool shit that you guys have made or love doing. And how do I, pick this up and match it to Maz? Right. That's kind of a pretty good.
That's a good point. And it's like kind of like mini stories. Mini stories telling
specific
story.
Quality.
And I think a lot of people, they write so much on their resume, but clearly what we're saying here is that it's really portfolio, but don't write maybe too much over there either. Like a good balance.
I see a question in the chat actually to that point, Erica, from Roth. Gonzalez, how long should a case study be on your portfolio and how much detail?
Lately, a little bit less is more. I also think there's a big difference between your portfolio and what you would present in a panel round. When you're in that panel and you're diving deep and you're telling the story, you're really taking people on the journey. But and 9 times out of 10, you get 20 minutes, 30 minutes per case study to do that. I'm not spending 30 minutes reading your website. So like, I don't know, succinct, sharp. Yeah, it's the condensed summary version of that. Hit me with the highlights. I'm not watching the full race, the full fight, the full match. Like I kind of just want the highlights. And if I'm sucked in, I'm like, oh, I gotta see the whole thing now. Like, I want to know more. But I really think you only need to be, I don't know, sharing just enough.
I would say have like quote unquote, like, you know how people have a running resume and then you just like edit it according to each job. You could have like a longer case study that you would hypothetically use for like one of those hour-long presentations. And then you can just like,
trim it up,
expand the ones that are more important for that job description, and then shorten the ones that are less specific for what you're looking for in that moment.
Yeah, it's a fine line. No one's got attention spans. No one reads. So I don't know.
Sometimes I
do. No, I know.
Well, just to put numbers on it, like if I get a case study, if I get somebody's portfolio that's like a Figma presentation or Google something, if it's 75 pages, the first thing I think is this person can't edit themselves. The whole deal about being a UX person is that it's like know thy audience, know that we're limited on time, UX, and you're making the complex simple, right? So if your portfolio is a hot mess or just really it's long in being a hot mess, then that is a signal to me. It's like, oh, you can't succinctly distill things to their crucial points, which is going to be a big part of the role.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yep. I feel you.
But 10 to 15 pages, I feel like for a case study, just to get your foot in the door, maybe that's not as long as like an hour long or even a half an hour long case study presentation might be. But I think 10 to 15 pages per case study, to me, maybe that's even a little long.
Yeah.
Slides, exactly. Like I think if you can just show your design thinking, I think it's really important to like give an overview, like what is this that you're going to look at? Why does this exist? And then list the successes, like either at the beginning or the end. Right. So it's like, okay, what was the impact on the business? What was the impact on the user? And then showing how your design thinking works as you're, to your point, Maz, like, you want some narration and some annotation, like how is this person getting through each screen? Are they showing the research? Are they showing how the sausage was made behind what the actual finished product is? Which a lot of people that are very visual UI leaning are just like, I don't want to show that it's ugly. And it's like, no, that's the good stuff. I mean, depending on the role, but oftentimes they want to know how that existed, how that came to be.
I love that. I know we're almost at time. I have a real quick question for you, Maz, that maybe, maybe you could share like advice, insight, anything to people. You've recently gone through the experience yourself of getting a new role. You've gone and done a lot of interviews with companies, some good, some less good, but you also touched on it earlier of just like some were practiced then as well. For all these people out there going through the hoops, going through the motions, it can feel like a one-way street where you're giving a lot to them and maybe not getting something in return. Like, did you have a moment you spoke to yourself and said, no, I get something out of this? Like how do you turn this process, which can feel trying and frustrating, how do you turn it into something constructive still for yourself, or you get something out of it no matter what? Like, were there little things that you would do to just think, okay, experience points, like, sanity, save sanity. I
would say, and again, I'm going to say it's much easier said than done because I am on the other side of it. And there were dark points this summer.
Right.
Sugarcoat
okay.
It. Like imposter syndrome was in a deep, dark place. And I really, it sounds so like woo-woo, but like that's kind of who I am anyway. Whatever. Like it really wasn't until the moment that I like let go. Like I was clinging on so tight to every single process and every single stage of every process. And it wasn't until like middle of the summer I was like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
I kind of just let go of focusing so much, and I started doing more like meditation. I would prep a couple days before, study. I studied like it was a college exam.
Okay.
Prep a couple days before. I did a lot of writing answers out over and over again so that it was more natural, and it was like, and I think this also came from the process of unfortunately interviewing a lot of places, getting frustrated, and then being like, okay, like my friends, my peers, talking to them, having them giving me more affirmations, like, no, this is what you're good at, telling them how the interview went. You know, recruiters talk to recruiters a lot, and giving like, oh, that was a good answer, but you could have also talked about this case study that you did. And then getting all of that kind of into a notebook that I just kept in one place, and then meditating the day of, trying to keep a clear mind, do a walk, just be in a better positive headspace.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
Wow. And it sounds like some of that, or a lot of that, likely came through in your ultimate process at DataDog, right? You got to turn up, you got to be yourself, sort of enjoy being in the process.
Yeah.
Through some of that prep and the relaxing.
I felt safer. I felt cared for. And I was also getting green flags of, I could tell that they knew what I did and they respected what I did. And they like, you know, like that kind of thing. And also as recruiters, we know this, and I didn't want to admit it. Like the way I got that job was I applied to the role the minute it came out, and I sent a message to some of the hiring managers, just an authentic.
It can work.
2 to 3 sentences. We use DataDog at Peloton. I have a lot of respect for the brand and the culture. And I happened to hit with my now peer, Zach, who actually like had reached out to me in the past for a role that I didn't remember that happening, you know? So I know it feels like you're talking to a void, but it's kind of like, that's a numbers game. So if you can mentally keep yourself stable while also doing the numbers game and just be less attached to it, I feel like that's when something will
the meditation, that is a really great tip.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's a time. I know it was a roller coaster. I know a lot of people on this kind of ride at the moment too. And
and I'm really grateful that now I kind of am on stable ground and I can help my friends, because as recruiters, I think another thing people don't realize is we're the first on the chopping block. You know, like we're all nervous about our jobs all the time these days. So
I'm always like, how can we be repurposed? Like, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. I know we're at time. I don't know if you guys want to wrap up with anything else or.
No, thank you, Maz. So thank you so much for being here. It was so great to learn from you and share your experiences and stories, and so great.
Even just being asked to do this helped my imposter syndrome. So.
Yes.
Exactly.
I love that. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back in 2 weeks, right? Checking. And we'll have more updates. Follow the Design Unfiltered page. We've been firing that up. We're going to cut some nice little clips out of this because, Maz, you shared so many good little nuggets. We'll trim those out. We'll share them on our page. This information is there to be accessed anytime. Thank you to everyone that just jumps on and does their thing.
Yes. Thank you for all your questions, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
So appreciate it.
What it is. Yeah.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. I'll hit that button.
Bye.